Alright, so this is my first time posting here, which I guess makes sense. Unless I was unlucky with these random encounters. But anyway, this happened last night, so I'm still a little shaken up and weirded out. I journaled about it, but a friend of mine told me about this subreddit, so I figured this would be a better place to write this, since I'd be among friends, so to speak. I live in this city. Crime is pretty bad in only a few clusters of areas, but where I'm at, it's okay. Okay enough that walking around at night is fine. The only issues we've had in my neighborhood involving criminals were carjackings, but that was a couple of years ago. Anyway, even though I'm in the city, there's a huge field next to a school by my house. This field fits two full baseball fields, and then some. It's massive. At night, it's just a fun place to go and clear your mind, or just enjoy the night sky since you can actually see the stars out there, despite being in the city. So, on the far end of the field, opposite of the school, it is the darkest at night, just really far from street lights or anything. And there's this big tree seated in the middle of the back area. On that tree are a pair of DIY swings. I like to go and hang out for fun, or if I'm on the phone or something. So last night, I went there around 9:30 p.m. Pretty empty there considering it was a school night. From the swings, I could see people way off in the distance, by the road on the other side of the field, and some people all the way by the school, directly across from me. So where was I? I felt cozy and secluded. I went over there to call a friend of mine. I had my AirPods in with transparency mode enabled, but talking with him and swinging, I really couldn't hear anything else. So I was swinging along and we chatted for about 2 minutes, but then he said he needed to call back. So I let him go and saw I had a text from my girlfriend. I stopped swinging to look down, and for whatever reason, I looked up and around the area. In the dark, I saw a figure walking directly towards me, maybe 30 yards out. I very quickly felt a tinge of discomfort. I did not tell anyone I knew I'd be out here, and this figure was beelining straight at me. He wasn't walking straight on from the school either. He was approaching from a diagonal angle, so it felt very deliberate that he was heading straight towards me. I sort of froze for a moment. I thought to myself that he must know I'm here, because I had been swinging just a moment ago, and my phone was on, so the brightness was illuminating me a little, especially with how dark it is out there. So my next thought was, maybe it's a dog walker or something, but as the figure came into view better, it was clearly a man who was wearing a black or dark colored hoodie. He looked bigger, tallish, maybe 5'11" or 6 foot. He just kept walking straight at me with a steady pace. Finally, I got up and swiftly began walking at a calm, steady pace, away towards the school, sort of diagonal to his path. I didn't want to appear panicked, I guess. He looked at me as we crossed. I could not see his face, but I could see that he turned his head at me as he kept walking to where I was. Without skipping a beat or anything, he immediately sat down in the swing I was just at and began swinging, looking at me. Because he turned his head my direction once, he was sitting down. My gut told me this was an older man based on his build and look, but obviously I couldn't be sure. As I walked away from the darkness where he was and towards the school, I got the feeling he would start following me, so I tried to keep an eye on him as I walked. But it's so dark out there, I couldn't see him once I was far enough away. Once I got to the school, I tried taking a long exposure shot of that area on my camera I had brought, but the photo was too blurry to see anything. My buddy called me back soon after, so I answered, but told him to give me a moment because I was still scanning the area. He was a little spooked by the sound of my voice, And as he was asking me what was wrong, I noticed someone standing near the trees next to the school. This must have been 20 yards away. This did not look like the same guy, but it felt equally off to me because he was just standing completely still in the trees, facing my direction. I looked at him, began speaking on the phone, sort of trying to show him I was on the phone, and then he moved away and turned around. After that, I walked home, just totally spooked and confused. My mind was racing about what would have happened if I stayed, and why the guy was walking straight at me. The disturbing thought dawned on me that perhaps he thought I was a kid or something. My girlfriend suggested it may have been a drug deal, and I happened to be the first there on accident. The friend I was talking to and my girlfriend recommended I call the police to give a description in case the guy was out there for kids, and there were kids nearby. I did, and later that night, an officer called me to confirm the description. I felt bad because I didn't have much, but he said it was okay and they keep an eye out for suspicious activity. Anyway, I hope this is the last time I post here. It was so bizarre. I have so many questions. I'm glad I got out of there though. My gut told me it wasn't safe and I didn't question it. I was dating a guy named Josh for about 3 months when this happened. We were seeing each other a few times a week, and things were moving fast. We even started talking about moving in together. But before anything like that, I thought it would be good to take a trip together. We decided to go to Miami because it was not that far and it seemed fun. Josh was funny and easy to be around so far. He worked in construction, and I was finishing up a graduate program in public health. We booked a long weekend and found a place on Airbnb 2 blocks from South Beach. It had one bedroom, a kitchenette, and a little patio with plastic chairs. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, and the price was decent. They only gave us one key, which seemed weird, but we were going to be together the whole time, so it didn't seem like a problem. We both took a day off from work and got in on a Friday afternoon. The weather was hot, and we walked around the neighborhood for a while. After we dropped off her bags, we grabbed dinner at a Cuban place nearby and sat outside. Josh had 2 beers with dinner, and I had one. Everything was good so far, and I remember thinking we made a good choice coming here. After dinner, we went back to the Airbnb and changed. The plan was to go out to a club on the Ocean Drive that had good reviews and didn't charge a cover before 11. I wore a green sundress, and Josh put out a white shirt. He looked nice. We walked over 10, and this place was already packed. The music was loud, and a DJ was set up on a raised platform near the back. We found a small table near the wall, and a server came by almost immediately. Josh ordered drinks for both of us, without asking what I wanted, which I let go because he knew what I usually drank. The first round went fine. We talked, watched the crowd, and he seemed happy. By the second drink, he was already starting to seem drunk. I didn't think much of it yet, because I'm not someone who monitors how much people drink. We were on a vacation, and it was a Friday night, so I figured we were both allowed to let loose a little. He ordered a third round before I finished my second, which I noticed but didn't comment on. He flagged the server down and ordered shots alongside the drinks. I took mine and didn't say anything. Then at around 11, he started getting up from the table. He said he was going to the bar to grab something, or that he wanted a better view of the DJ. I watched him work his way towards the bar, and I could see him from our table. He was talking to random people, and he was obviously really drunk. He came back once and sat down and drank more. Then he got up again. I checked my phone and scrolled through it and tried not to look like I was watching him, but that's what I was doing. Then one time he didn't come back for almost 20 minutes. I got up and found him near the far end of the bar, standing next to two women who looked like they were in their mid-20s. He had his elbow on the bar and was leaning towards one of them while she leaned back slightly. Her friend was looking at her phone and ignoring the situation. I watched her for about 10 seconds, then I walked over. I put my hand on his arm and said his name. He turned around with a big smile like he was happy to see me, which irritated me. I told him quietly that I thought we should head back to the table. He said sure, then turned back to the woman and said something to them that I didn't understand. They didn't respond in any meaningful way, and he followed me back to the table. I told him he had enough to drink and that I thought we should slow down. Then about 15 minutes later, I went to the bathroom, and when I got back, he was gone from the table again. I spotted him quickly this time. He was near the edge of the dance floor, standing next to a woman who was alone. She was in her early 30s. She had dark hair and a short red dress. She had her arms crossed loosely in front of her, and she looked uncomfortable. Josh was talking to her, and he put his hand briefly on her shoulder, but she moved away. Then a man appeared from behind Josh and stepped around to face him. He was about the same height as Josh, but stronger looking. He said something to Josh. Then I stood up from the table. Josh laughed, and he said something back. Then the other guy punched him right across the jaw. Josh went straight down to the ground. He hit the floor, and then his head hit a second later. The couple and a small group walked away without looking back. The people immediately around them created space, and a few people pulled out their phones. The music was still loud, so I didn't hear anything the entire time. I got to Josh in a few seconds. He was on his back looking up at the lights, but he was conscious. There was no blood, but he looked like he was hurt. I crouched down and got my arm behind his shoulders and tried to help him sit up. I told him I was there and asked if he could hear me. He sat up part way and it seemed like he was coming back. Then the first thing he said was that I embarrassed him, and he seemed pissed off at me. I was confused, and then he put both hands on my shoulders and shoved me backwards. I stumbled and caught the edge of a chair with the back of my thigh and almost went down. This was when I looked back at him. He was angry and he looked like he wanted to fight me. He was getting up and I was scared. I just turned around and walked to the exit. The bouncer at the door glanced at me but didn't say anything. I walked the 2 blocks back to the Airbnb, and I was pretty mad at Josh. I got inside, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes. I washed my face and changed into shorts and a t-shirt. I drank a glass of water in the kitchen and looked out the small window above the sink. I thought about what just happened and tried to figure out what I should do. I turned on the TV and watched a cooking competition I didn't care about. Then after a few minutes, I realized that I wasn't comfortable being alone with Josh. That was when I decided that I wasn't going to let him in. Then after a little after 1 in the morning, I heard him outside. He found the right address, which surprised me slightly. He knocked first and said my name, but it didn't move from the couch. Then he knocked again and said my name louder. He tried the handle, but it was locked. He kept at it for a while, but at some point a neighbor must have said something, because I heard a voice. I waited another 20 minutes before I turned the TV off and checked my phone. There were tons of messages and missed calls, but I ignored them all. I went to bed, and in the morning I looked out the bedroom window and saw him on the front steps. He was sitting slumped with his head against the railing. His white shirt was dirty, and one of his shoes was untied. He looked like someone who had a very bad night, which he did. I got dressed and brushed my teeth and packed all my stuff and left the place. Josh was still passed out when I walked past him, but I didn't try to wake him up. I just stepped over him. I took the bus home by myself and didn't even bother to check my messages until days later. Then Josh texted me twice the following week. The first message was an apology, and the second was shorter and said he hoped I was okay. I didn't respond to either. There wasn't anything he could have said that would make it okay what happened in that club, and I didn't see any reason to hear him out. I deleted his number and moved on without ever talking to him again. I guess it's good that I saw the side of him before he made any major commitment to each other. It would have been a mess if we moved in together. My name's Simone, and I was single for over a year before I met someone named Andy. It was a Thursday night, and I was at a bar with my friends. It was a loud, crowded place, but it was still a lot of fun. Andy sat down next to me when one of my friends went to the bathroom. He was tall, with dark hair and a good smile. He talked for about 20 minutes before my friend came back, and he was funny in a low-key way. He made some dry observations about the other people at the bar. Nothing mean, just funny. When my friend Sasha came over, he introduced himself to her and bought us both a round of drinks. When the bar got too loud to talk, he suggested we all move to a quieter table near the back. We spent another hour there, three of us talking about all kinds of stuff before Sasha and I left. He asked if he could have my number. Sasha gave me a small nod when he wasn't looking and gave him my number. He texted the next day, just a short message saying it was nice to meet me. Then he asked if I wanted to get coffee that weekend. I said yes, and we met on Saturday. Afternoon, it went well. We stayed for 2 hours, and when we said goodbye, he hugged me and said he'd like to do it again. Then the next week, he said there was a new restaurant he'd been wanting to try. It was a small Italian place on a side street. He said he thought I'd like it and sent me the address. I told him it sounded great. The next morning, I searched for the restaurant on Google Maps. I typed in the address and then tried a few different search terms for Italian restaurants in the area, but nothing came up. I texted Andy and told him I couldn't find it online. He replied within a few minutes and said it was only open recently and probably hasn't been indexed yet. He said a colleague recommended it and that it was definitely there. I almost canceled the night of the dinner because I had a headache after work. I took some Advil and felt better by 6. I changed out of my work clothes and called an Uber instead of taking the bus. When I got to the area, it was a short residential street with no street lights at the far end. The address Andy gave me was near the end of the block, and when I walked towards it, I saw a 2-story brick building with plywood over the ground floor windows. There was also a faded sign above the door that I couldn't read in the dark. There was a small parking lot beside it with weeds growing through the pavement. The place looked closed or maybe even abandoned, and it definitely wasn't a restaurant. However, Andy's car was parked at the edge of the lot, and he got out when he saw me. He was dressed nicely with a button-down shirt and dark pants, which seemed strange for where we were standing. He smiled and walked towards me. Then he said he was sorry that the restaurant shut down earlier that day. He said he only found out an hour ago. I looked at the building and I knew he was lying because the place clearly hadn't been open recently. I told him that the building looked like it had been closed for a long time. He made some excuses that didn't really make sense, and at the time I thought it was an honest mistake. Because of that, I was willing to let it go. I told him I thought we should just find somewhere else to eat, and I suggested a pizza place that I knew was nearby. He said it would take too long to drive over there and find parking and that we could just sit in his car for a few minutes and figure out a plan. He was already moving towards the passenger side and opening the door. I still thought it was too soon to get in his car alone, so I didn't want to. When I told him that, he started getting mad. He said that he went to the trouble of planning the evening, and the least I could do was sit down for 5 minutes. He wasn't yelling, but he was really annoyed. I told him I was going to go to the main road, so I turned and started walking. Then he got back in his car. I heard his engine behind me as I reached the sidewalk, but I kept walking and didn't turn around. He drove slowly, keeping pace with me about 2 feet to my left. He rolled down his window and told me to get in the car so we could talk privately, but I didn't answer him. Then suddenly he pulled ahead of me and angled his car across the sidewalk, blocking my path. I stopped and saw that he was watching me through the windshield. I crossed the street to get away from him. I didn't run yet, just walked quickly across to the other sidewalk. He reversed and started to follow me again, and that was when I ran. There was a convenience store on the corner of that street, and I ran for it, then went inside. There was a man behind the counter, probably in his 50s, wearing a gray cardigan. He looked up from his phone. I told him somebody was chasing me, and he asked if I wanted to call the cops. I said no, but that I just needed to stay for a while. I looked out the window, and Andy wasn't out there, but I didn't know if he was really gone. The clerk eventually said that if someone was really chasing me, then we should call the police. I knew he was right, so we called. When I told the cops, they didn't seem to think anything criminal happened, but they offered to give me a ride home, which I accepted. In the end, I got home safely, and I never heard from Andy again. I still think he probably set up the fake restaurant to get me into his car. What he would have done after that is anybody's guess, but it's probably better that I didn't get in. Hey everyone, I want to thank you all for listening, and if you enjoyed all those stories, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. And if you want to share your own story, the link is below in the description. I would love to read it. I thank you all for listening, and as always, stay depressed.